Welcome back to our third and final lecture on the Holocaust. We're going to talk about explanations here that have been put forward, like I said, by theologians and historians and filmmakers and novelists. But before I do that, I want to read one more quote. This is from an American GI who had entered one of the camps there in the spring of 1945. And as he goes through the camp, he describes what he sees. I just want to read one paragraph here for you. He says, quote, "The gas chambers are like bathrooms, like shower rooms, the gas issuing from splashing heads just like water in a shower. When a person had grown too weak to work in the mines, he's given a bar of soap and told to take a shower. The prisoner knows what's in store for him, but there's nothing you can do. Generally, they're in such a weakened state that resistance is impossible. They're led to shower rooms, stripped, their clothes burned, their shoes, eyeglasses collected, their hair collected. They enter the gas chambers, the gas is turned on, and they're killed. Then they're taken out and burned." Now, this is the part that really strikes me. "You could always tell which were the old and the younger persons. The younger corpses always burned with a brighter flame because of the fat inside their bodies. The older person's bodies, they were worn and lean and did not have very much fat content, and they burned without the bright flame." A rather harrowing observation by this American GI. Explanations. I have a lot of them here. I'm not going to go through all of them, but I am going to mention a couple. The one that is especially striking to me is the one that you discuss in philosophy class, and that is the existence of evil. How does evil and an omnipotent and omniscient God reside in the same place? Yehuda Bauer, Israeli intellectual, he says, quote, "There's no way that there can be an all-powerful and just God. He can either be all-powerful or just, but he can't be both." Let's talk about this argument for a moment. Bauer's argument runs like this. He says, "An all-powerful God who was just and loving would not have permitted 6 million innocent people to be slaughtered for any reason. If he's all-powerful, he would have intervened and stopped it. And if he's just, he would have intervened. If he's all-powerful and permitted near ultimate evil to prevail, 1 million children to be slaughtered virtually in front of their parents' eyes, without intervening, then God's no better than Satan." Which leads us to the second element of this argument. If God is just, he can't be very powerful, because if he's just, he would have wanted to intervene, but he just wasn't powerful enough to make a difference. He's a well-meaning, but not a very awesome God. A provocative argument, to say the least. The standard Christian response to this, of course, is free will. We're given free will by God to do as we please, good or bad. George Steiner also came up with an interesting argument here. The ontological argument. Because you exist, you must die. In other words, the Jews don't have to do anything. They don't have to commit an act. They're not being killed for their beliefs. They're being killed because they exist. They're Jewish. They have Jewish blood in their veins. Steiner makes another argument that I've always found interesting, at least for purposes of debate, and that is, he says that the Jews were destroyed because of the burdens it placed upon mankind. He said that Yahweh, the Jewish God of the Old Testament, had placed the burden of consciousness upon us so that we can reflect on our actions. He said that Jesus, the Jewish God of the New Testament, had established a level of conduct that we could never attain. We could aspire to it, but we could never attain it. And that Karl Marx, the 19th century Jewish philosopher and economist, had laid before us the reasons for man's exploitation of man. He said that Marx, Jesus, and Yahweh had imposed these standards of conduct and behavior that were unbearable burdens to the rest of mankind. And the Holocaust was essentially revenge for these burdens. Daniel Goldhagen's famous book, Hitler's Willing Executioners, makes the argument that Germany was, quote unquote, pregnant with murder. And that Hitler was there at the birth of the Holocaust, acting as the midwife, with the hot water and the towels. This thesis tends to absolve Hitler of guilt. I don't think the Holocaust would have occurred without him. Another book, The War Against the Jews, the author argues that the Holocaust was in fact Hitler's primary and central purpose, that Second World War was incidental to the Holocaust instead of the other way around. Again, a controversial argument. So I'm not going to go on and on with this. A lot of people have tackled it. If you're interested, I can give you a list of a lot of interesting films, documentary and otherwise, about the Holocaust, histories of it, novels about it. One of the more difficult and harrowing historical episodes in our history, in Western history. I could spend an entire semester talking about this topic. I know this is a survey class, so we can't do that. But I think this is maybe the most important topic that we do discuss this semester, because we have this tendency. We're all still children of the Enlightenment, and we have this wrong-headed notion that we continue to improve. Now, perhaps in technology and perhaps in medicine and other things, we do make progress. I don't know that we've made any moral progress as human beings. We tend to think that something as horrendous as the Holocaust is behind us and could not happen again. And of course, that's nonsense. It's already happened again. I can point to Rwanda in 1994, where the Hutus slaughtered the Tutsis. What's the last number I saw? 800,000 or 900,000. This took place in 90 days. You can look at the Bosnian Muslims during the breakup of Yugoslavia, during the Yugoslav Civil War, where the Serb army had entered Bosnia and has slaughtered the Muslims in the thousands. You can look at what's happened in southern Sudan over the past generation. And there are other examples. So my point is that this type of atrocity is not behind us. And I spend some time with this, hoping that you will be alert to the signs of another potential Holocaust. And the first sign, of course, is the creation of categories, creating categories where you can put people, whether they're Muslims or whether it's based on color, skin color, or based on religion or nationality. Once we begin to create categories, then we can begin to legislate against the people in those categories. So keep your senses alert to these things. They're important. Thank you.